I was standing in my father's office at our family construction company staring at an old photograph on his desk. Mom, Dad, Dylan, and me. We looked happy back then. That picture was taken 25 years ago when my parents first opened this business. Mom passed away when I was 17. I started working here. At 18 began with labor work. Thought this place would eventually be mine. I was wrong. It took one conversation with my father to shatter everything I believed about family and loyalty. Before I tell you what happened that night in my father's office, I would love to know where you are watching from. Drop your city in the comments below. And if you have ever felt like the invisible child in your own family, hit that like button. Subscribe if you want to hear how this story ends, because trust me, you will not see it coming. Now let me take you back to where it all started. My mother, Sarah, died of breast cancer when I was 17 years old. My father, Richard, was devastated. He could barely get out of bed for weeks. Someone had to keep the company running, and that someone was me. I dropped out during my senior year of high school. While my classmates were planning prom and graduation parties, I was on construction sites at 5:30 in the morning, carrying lumber, mixing concrete, learning the business from the ground up. Dylan was only 13 at the time. Dad wanted him to stay in school to have a normal childhood. I understood that. I really did. So while Dylan played baseball and went to friends' houses after school, I worked 12-hour days. I learned bookkeeping at night, studying invoices and estimates until my eyes burned. Dad would sometimes come into the office late at night and find me there. He would put his hand on my shoulder and say, "You are saving us, son. Your mother would be so proud." Those words kept me going for years. I believed my sacrifice would be recognized someday. 5 years passed. I worked my way up from laborer to foreman. I knew every aspect of the business. I could estimate a job in my sleep, negotiate with suppliers, manage crews, handle difficult clients. The Henderson family hired us for a major home renovation, and I managed that project from start to finish. I found ways to save 15% on material costs without compromising quality. Mrs. Henderson told my father it was the best contractor experience she ever had. I thought maybe finally I would get the recognition I deserved. Then Dylan graduated from the University of Denver with a business degree. He was 22, fresh-faced, full of ideas about modernizing the company. When he came to work, Dad immediately gave him the title of project manager. It took me 5 years of grueling work to make foreman, but Dylan walked in with a corner office and business cards. I told myself to be patient, to be supportive. He was my brother. He deserved a chance. But things changed fast. Dad started asking Dylan for input on every major decision. When we discussed whether to bid on the new community center project, Dad turned to Dylan and asked what he thought. I had already done preliminary research, knew the numbers, understood the timeline, but Dad wanted Dylan's opinion. My younger brother, who had been working there for 3 months somehow, had more valuable insights than I did after 10 years. The real gut punch came during a meeting about expanding our showroom. I had spent 2 weeks researching suppliers, getting quotes, creating a presentation about which materials to showcase. When I brought my findings to the meeting, Dad barely glanced at them. He was too busy listening to Dylan talk about creating an Instagram presence and modernizing our brand image. Those things were fine, but they had nothing to do with the supplier contracts we were supposed to be discussing. I sat there feeling invisible. Then came the Henderson project completion. I was proud of that work. We had finished 2 weeks early, stayed under budget, and the clients were thrilled. I thought surely this would earn me a promotion, maybe a raise, at least some public acknowledgement. Instead, that Friday evening, Dad announced we were going to dinner at the steakhouse downtown. I thought it was to celebrate the Henderson success. I was wrong. We sat down, ordered our food, and Dad cleared his throat in that way he does when he has something important to say. He looked at Dylan with this proud smile and announced that Dylan was being promoted to Vice President of Operations. I was mid-bite when I heard those words. I started choking on my steak, had to grab my water glass. Dad did not even notice. He was too busy explaining why Dylan deserved this position. Dylan has the education and vision we need to modernize, Dad said. He brings fresh perspectives that will take us into the future. I sat there, fork frozen in my hand, watching my father praise my brother for potential while completely ignoring my proven track record. He never mentioned the Henderson project. Never mentioned my 10 years of loyalty. Never mentioned that I had given up my youth to save this company when Mom died. I finished that dinner in silence, went home and stared at my ceiling until 3 in the morning. The next week I tried talking to Dad. I walked into his office, closed the door and said as calmly as I could manage, "Dad, I have been here for 10 years. I know this business inside out." He did not even look up from his computer. Experience is not everything, Landon. Dylan brings fresh ideas. That was it. That was all I got. I swallowed my anger and went back to work. What else could I do? This was my family. I kept showing up at 5 in the morning, while Dylan strolled in at 9. I stayed until 8 at night finishing paperwork, while Dylan left at 5 to meet friends for drinks. I watched him arrive late 3 times in 1 week, and Dad said nothing. When I was 5 minutes late 2 years ago because of a flat tire, Dad lectured me about responsibility for 20 minutes. 3 months into Dylan's new role, the cracks started showing. He signed a contract with a new supplier without consulting me. He was excited about getting a better price, about showing Dad he could make smart business decisions. The materials showed up at the Martinez family job site, and I knew immediately something was wrong. The lumber was warped. The concrete mix did not meet our specifications. I had to make emergency calls to our old supplier pay rush fees and explain to the Martinez family why we were delayed. I went to Dad with the receipts, the photos, the evidence of Dylan's mistake. I expected him to be concerned. Instead, he got defensive. Dylan made a judgment call, he said. We all make mistakes. I remembered 5 years earlier, when I made a minor scheduling error that delayed a project by 2 days. Dad spent 2 weeks reminding me how that mistake cost us credibility. But when Dylan's poor decision cost us $3,000 and nearly lost us a client, suddenly mistakes were just part of learning. Then Dylan had his big idea. He wanted to open a second location in Boulder. He created this whole presentation about expanding our market, reaching wealthier clients, establishing a presence in a growing area. He talked about branding and market share and growth projections. It sounded impressive. Dad was completely sold. I did my research. I spent nights analyzing the Boulder market, looking at competitor saturation, studying economic trends. I found that the area already had 6 established construction companies. The market was oversaturated. Plus, the economic indicators suggested a downturn was coming. Opening a new location would require a huge investment, at least $250,000, and the risk was enormous. I presented my findings at the next meeting. I had spreadsheets, market analysis, projected costs versus realistic revenue expectations. Dylan dismissed everything. He said I was being too cautious, too afraid of growth, stuck in old ways of thinking. Dad nodded along with everything Dylan said. You are too risk-averse, Landon, Dad told me. Dylan sees opportunities where you see obstacles. They opened the Boulder branch in April. By July, we had landed exactly 2 clients. 2. The overhead costs were killing us. Rent, utilities, insurance, equipment, staff salaries. We were bleeding money. Meanwhile, our main office was struggling because we had diverted resources to Boulder. Our cash flow became a serious problem. I had to make cuts. I had to lay off 2 employees who had been with us for years. Good men, friends. They had families. I had to look them in the eye and tell them we could not afford to keep them. I was the one who had to deliver that news because Dylan could not handle it, and Dad was too busy trying to make the Boulder branch work. I went home that night and could not sleep. Those men lost their jobs because of Dylan's poorly researched decision, and I was the one who had to destroy their livelihoods. By September, I was drowning. I was doing my job plus covering for Dylan's oversights. He kept forgetting critical tasks: payroll processing, permit applications, client follow-ups. I would stay late fixing his mistakes, making sure nothing fell through the cracks. I was exhausted, angry, and completely undervalued. One Friday night in late September, I was alone in the office at 9 p.m., processing payroll that Dylan had forgotten to handle. Again, I heard the door open, and my father walked in. He looked surprised to see me. "What are you still doing here?" he asked. I looked at him, at this man I had sacrificed everything for, and something inside me just broke. "I am here because someone has to fix the mess," I said quietly. "The Boulder branch is bleeding money. We are down 15% in revenue this quarter." I pulled up the spreadsheet on my computer, turned the monitor toward him. "Look at these numbers, Dad. Really look at them." He glanced at the screen, and his jaw tightened. "I do not need you second-guessing every decision," he said. I stood up. "I am not second-guessing. I am trying to save the company Mom built with you." The moment I mentioned Mom, his face changed. "Do not you dare bring your mother into this. She would want me to give Dylan a chance I could not keep the bitterness out of my voice anymore. He has had 3 years of chances. When do I get recognized for 10 years of loyalty?" The silence was heavy. Then my father said the words that changed everything. "If you do not like how I run things, maybe you should step aside." Those words hit me like a physical blow. Step aside. I stared at him. "You mean leave?" "I mean exactly what I said. If you cannot support Dylan, maybe this is not the place for you." I stood there for what felt like an eternity. Then I nodded slowly. "You are right," I said. "Maybe it is not." I grabbed my jacket and walked out of that office. I did not say goodbye. I did not slam the door. I just left. I went home that night and could not sleep. I kept replaying the conversation in my head. My father had essentially told me I was expendable.